At DDI, we turn data-driven insights into dynamic leadership development, unlocking potential, sparking growth, driving performance, because better leaders create a better future.
Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, High-Payoff Leadership Development, What to Prioritize When Everything is Urgent. Here are a few housekeeping tips before we begin. This session is being recorded and you will receive the link to watch on demand later today. The slides, along with other important resources, can be found in the handouts or resources section of your console. Feel free to use the chat to share your comments and insights throughout the session. And for presenter questions, please use the Q&A panel. And now let's welcome in DDI Senior Consultant, Leah Aronoff, to get us started. Welcome in, Leah.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Now, before we even dive in here, I am very curious how many of you resonate with this fella here on the slide, this frantic sort of feeling where teams and leaders pulled in a different direction every other second. Give me some hands up. I'm seeing a lot in the chat already. And that doesn't surprise me. It's something I hear from customers all the time. Everyone is feeling stretched right now and everything seems urgent, which is exactly why prioritization has become such a critical conversation. I imagine that's why you're here today. So thank you for choosing to spend time, your limited time with us. My goal today is that you leave with a clearer way to focus on what truly matters within your role. How to build leadership capability, that development that's top of mind, but in a way that actually drives impact, even in the middle of all of that noise and being pulled left and right. So before we jump in, just a quick introduction. Here I'm Leah Aronoff, a senior consultant at DDI. I focus on, I'd like to say, the what and why behind leadership development. So partnering with organizations really from all different sectors, but ultimately on how to design solutions that actually move the business forward. You're going to hear that perspective throughout today. I'll bring it into today's conversation with a lot of the examples I can share about how this all comes to life. But first, I'd love to get your input. So what I often see, just to kind of lay the foundation here, is that teams are pulled in every direction, as you all sort of shared, and development becomes very reactive. And that's where impact, I often see, starts to disappear. So you'll see a few common leadership development risks on the screen, and you're going to get a poll. So just go ahead and select the one that feels most true for your organization right now, where you'd most want to see stronger payoff. Take a moment to do that now.
Leah, the poll is open. You should see results on the right-hand side of your screen, but I'm going to go ahead and maximize it. We should start seeing results.
Fantastic. Thank you.
There we go. That was
Beautiful.
a big jump.
I'll give it. It was. I'm already seeing a good amount come through. I'll give it a couple more seconds just to see what's coming through here. What I'm already seeing, and what's not surprising, is we're seeing a mix. And these challenges do tend to show up together. But each of you has now identified the one that feels most pressing. And so that really becomes a really important starting point for you. And I want to have you keep that top of mind as we go through today's webinar. Thank you for taking the time to respond. I'm going to actually go ahead and have that closed. And what I'd like to pose is the question, right? Knowing that that is your biggest risk that you see, what actually is going to drive payoff? That's the question of the day. Some of you may know the show River Monsters. You can put in the chat if you are familiar, but no worries if not. I just want to walk you through it for a moment to talk about an analogy that sort of comes to mind when I think about high payoff. This specific show, River Monsters, it follows Jeremy Wade. He's a biologist who traveled the world catching rare fish. And sometimes ones people weren't even sure existed. There was almost like a mythology to it. And he got really good at it. So good to the point that they had to actually cancel the show because he collected all of the fish. He caught all of the fish. And that's not really the point. The point here is that he really had a reflection moment when he wrote in his book what he thought was the success that he was able to reach. And it really came down to three things. The first was you need the right bait in the right place at the right time. If even one of those was off, he said you don't get the result. All three had to be present. And what's interesting is that most organizations aren't starting from ground zero. They already have pieces of this in place, their own version of those priorities that really get them focused and get that success they're looking for. But when those pieces don't line up fully, that's when I often see that the payoff does disappear. And so rather than asking, what more should we do? The better question becomes, how do we make sure we're aligning the few things that actually drive impact? And here's how we at DDI like to think about that. What we found in our research is that leadership investment really pays off when four things are aligned. And you see them on the slide here: developing the roles that are most critical, keyword, to your business. Targeting the key moments as well, where leaders need to navigate within that. Data to inform those decisions. And then also having the experience that really will, again, drive behavior change. That's always what we talk about with our customers and what we want to see. We want to see that impact to the bottom line. And so as you look at these, I want you to keep in mind the risk that you selected earlier as your top area. Because in most cases, team, that risk isn't solved by just going deeper in one of these areas. It's really going to be solved by making sure that the right pieces are working together. Again, that's how we catch that river monster fish, so to speak. Seeing some fans of the fish in the chat. So let's start with the first lever, the right role. Now, first things first, where should you actually be focusing your investment? Which roles matter most? Because one of the fastest ways to lose impact is spreading investment too evenly. I see this all of the time, rather than concentrating it where it will actually move the business. Look across your leadership pipeline. I encourage you to do this through that lens of your strategy. What will leaders need to do differently, in other words, in the next 3 to 5 years? Future focused. And which roles, therefore, do you have to get right because they are evolving? I'll give you an example. I hear this a lot in manufacturing. Plant managers is a topic, is a role rather, that comes up a lot. And they were historically focused on execution and operations, right? But now we're being asked to lead through transformation, manage more complexity, and influence across functions. Those silos are coming down. And so the role hasn't gotten just bigger. It's fundamentally different. So identifying the right role gives you focus, but that alone isn't enough. Once you've identified the right role, the next question becomes, are you treating everyone in that role the same? The reality is, within any level, you have a mix, right? Some are new, most are performing, and some are accelerating. If you treat them the same, you're going to dilute impact. Bottom line that I want you to take from this, the needs are different, even within the role you've identified as critical. That means that you're focusing on different outcomes because the needs are different to begin with. So for those new to role, it's about speed to contribution typically, clarity, building confidence. For those performing in place, that majority, it's about sustained results, continued skill building and engagement oftentimes. And for those that are accelerating, it's about readiness of what's next, right? Stepping into broader impact more quickly, finding opportunities to stretch them so that we can really get them ready for that next role. So I want you to feel free to share in the chat which role and piece of the pie you see as a priority in your organization, if anything comes to mind. I truly want this to be the starting point of how we start to prioritize and think about investment a bit more concretely. And if we bring this back to the bigger picture, it's not just choosing the right role, it's being precise within that role. That's the takeaway here. The same idea really applies to the next level. It's not just who, it's when. So I'm going to go there next. And thank you for those who shared just their reflections in the meantime about what's percolating for them. Even with the right people, right? If development doesn't meet them in the right moments, what have we learned? It doesn't stick. Development needs to flex to the moment. Sometimes it's building skills at scale, right? We know that we just have these fundamental skills we need everybody to develop. Sometimes it's supporting someone stepping into a new role in particular. Sometimes it's just in time support. I have a tough conversation tomorrow. I gotta give some feedback for improvement. Not feeling so grounded. How do I do this in a productive way? And then there are also, this one's really important, right? Reacting to sudden change, the unexpected moments as well. I know the one that comes to mind from 6 years ago for many of us is COVID. That is a very clear distinction, a moment in time where we had to react immediately. So when development matches the moment, it becomes part of how work gets done, right? We want it to be relevant to them. It has to feel like the thing that is most important and critical for them to conquer and achieve. So I'd love to hear from you again. What's the biggest challenge your leaders are facing today? What's a hot sort of disruptor in the moment? I'm going to take a look at the chat, give you a second to share.
Leah, can I ask you to move your the mic on your headset down just a bit while we're waiting for those results to come in? There we go.
Can
Thank
do.
you.
Is that better? My pleasure. Okay, seeing things pop through here. Oh yeah. That burnout is definitely a tough one. The agility piece. AI, yes, that is a very common topic that we see. I'm sure as you're looking through here at others' responses, there's some themes that you're probably pulling out already when it comes to change and the ability to really navigate that. So thank you for sharing. I truly, I didn't again have any surprises here. Seeing AI be one of the ones I'm seeing through the chat here. Valentina, for example, sharing. And AI is becoming one of those defining moments, absolutely. It's not just about using the technology, it's about when, why, and how to use it in a way that builds, yes, efficiency, we're all very excited about that, but also maintaining trust at the same time. That is so, so important. So this is often, an example that comes to mind when I talk to my customers today, that hot topic of AI disruption. And what we're seeing, especially given the pace of change, is how easy it is for organizations to become, yet again, reactive. As AI becomes more embedded in work, and it will inevitably, it's easy to focus on what the technology can do. That's important, but they're kind of stuck in that AI acumen phase, so to speak, and they themselves are kind of losing sight of leadership's critical role in broader adoption, right? That's the end goal. We want to see people adopt this. Our research points to 5 capabilities that matter most in moments like this. And so this was an example of a time where we saw, okay, AI is kind of blowing things up. How do we anchor our customers in understanding how they can support leadership and the critical role they play? Our research points to 5 capabilities that matter most in moments like this. You're going to see them as the 5 C's here on the slide. Quickly, I'll go through. First is connection. So building trust so teams stay aligned through change. Like I said, maintaining that trust. Conscience is another one, making sound value-based decisions as the complexity increases. One classic example that you could think about is simply using Copilot, perhaps, and knowing what parameters and guidelines to have in place when you leverage it. So you're not sort of just blindly taking what it says, right? You have some guidelines, you have some judgment around that. Clarity is also critical here. You need to help teams focus because there's too much information. I mean, we live in that economy right now of too much information, but absolutely you need to help them ground and understanding what is the thing I need to be focusing on. With that, leaders need to be curious as well, right? We won't have all the answers. We know that things are moving so quickly. They're changing so quickly in the AI world, but we need to keep learning. We need to be leaning into that, have a growth mindset, in other words. And then creativity, of course, too, right? Because without that, you're turning insight into not much of anything, but you want to see meaningful action and better outcomes. So absolutely, creativity comes to the table here. These are the 5 C's that we like to talk about. And these are what help teams navigate complexity. So again, adoption, this is one of the ways that we help our customers think through this real life example that everybody is facing right now. Okay, let's shift to the third lever, the right data. This one is juicy. Data is what helps you decide where to invest and whether it's working. But it's not about more data all of the time. It's about the right mix. Magic is in the mix. So take a quick look at the types of data on the screen here. How many of these are you actually bringing together today? Have a moment to reflect. You can feel free to share in the chat too. I'm appreciating all of the conversations that I'm seeing come through. But really, I want you to ask yourself, what are you relying on most right now within your organization? Are you only comparing yourself to yourself? Are you also looking at what's happening outside the organization, perhaps? What we typically see, most organizations are pulling from 1 or 2 sources, I'd say, but not necessarily connecting across them. So you really need more than one lens, internal and external, the quantitative, yes, as well as the qualitative. And by the way, I've made this mistake myself. In one case that I think back on, we were working with a team, it was an insurance company, and I was focused on helping leaders translate strategy into action. They were really seeing a lack there, and they wanted to make it more tangible and operational. So we built around that. There's clear frameworks that we put together, tools to break down strategy into priorities, a lot of that tactical piece. And what we came to realize when it came to the actual training to engage everybody and all the leaders, momentum just, it wasn't there. It fell flat, essentially. And so when we looked more closely at the data, engagement patterns for one thing, leader input, and how decisions were actually being made in the organization, it turned out the gap wasn't really translation, it was buy-in. Yeah, go figure. So leaders didn't just need to understand the strategy, they needed to see how it connected to a bigger vision and feel ultimately empowered to act on it. And that's really the risk that I often see, data without direction. It's just noise. Let me say that again. Data without direction is just noise. So we had signals, but not the full picture. Now, what I can say is when we shifted and we understood the bigger picture, sort of what was driving the why, we started to put a program together for their summit. All the senior leaders were there. We focused on strategic storytelling, how to tell a story, how to really bring in what's in it for me, what do I bring to the table, and really thinking through connection. And the energy and the engagement in that room, I'm telling you, it was palpable. I remember there was like an eruption of applause at some point when we did one of the activities to practice telling a story and really bring the people alongside that strategy. So let me show you what that looks like when those pieces do come together. Now in the lens of decision making, really thinking through talent. I remember some people highlighted that as a risk area for them. And so I would like to bring that through with a really great example that I saw. Now, there's a lot of data on the screen here. For a moment, let me just give you a little bit of context. I worked with a healthcare organization about a year ago that was trying to identify who was ready to move from directors to VPs. And they felt quite confident. They had a short list, in fact, based on the experiences and leader input that they had. But when we aligned that to an objective data point, so in this case, it was Leader 3 Ready, for those who are familiar. It's a simulation-based assessment that we offer at DDI. And what we do with that assessment is we actually link it to their business priorities. Again, business is the top thing that you got to keep in mind. So we had those on the left-hand side, you're seeing those key business challenges, what we like to call business drivers. And then with that, you configure it. There's specific competencies that they're sort of assessed against to see how effective they are at demonstrating them in multiple different scenarios. And this really started to change the picture, everyone. So we asked, what are the most critical business priorities over the next 5 years? And I even kind of had to take it a step further with them. So we had these 4 areas on the left-hand side, but I said, okay, what is the top 2 highest payoff things that we have to get right as we're moving the strategy forward? The ones that came to the surface, you're seeing highlighted, driving profitable growth, as well as driving operational transformation. And with that, we see on the right-hand side, business savvy, entrepreneurship, leading change, and strategic influence were the competencies or skill areas that really support that. They're the things that they needed to do to really meet those challenges. And from there, we took a look at a heat chart. So this was that short list group that went through Leader 3 Ready. And what was quite interesting here, if you take a look, we have business savvy, entrepreneurship, leading change, and strategic influence highlighted for you. One leader was initially at the top of that list, number 1 that you're seeing. They thought, absolutely, this person for sure, because they're so strong in performance today. But when you look at the critical areas that we identified are needed to be successful in the future to drive that strategy, we actually saw a lot of red and maybe a few blues too, so proficiencies, but really no strengths there. And what's interesting is that someone else who was completely off the radar, who hadn't been a primary focus, emerged as one of the most ready leaders to step into that role, to that VP role. So it wasn't really about replacing judgment team, right? That was a data point. It's an important one, but absolutely grounding it in objective data made a hell of a difference, right? We were able to see what the business actually needs and have that inform some decisions that we were going to make. And that's when data really moves from signals to real direction. Once you have that level of clarity, you're not just going to make selection decisions that are better, stronger. You're setting up much more targeted development as well. And yes, we can follow up with some information about the assessment, Todd. When you combine strong data with development, our research shows us that you really see a big difference. This is meaningful, everyone. This is 2 times stronger bench strength. So I want to keep that in mind for all of us, especially when you're thinking about, let's say you identified your most senior levels as your key focus area, your role that you really identified as critical. You don't just want development typically in these cases. You want clear objective insight into where to focus. And the data, like I said, it informs decisions, but it also becomes part of the experience, right? You're able to really see that. So if we know who to focus on and where to invest, what's the right experience to actually build that capability? That is the next question that you're probably thinking. And this is where I like to think everything comes together. The right experience isn't just chosen in isolation. It's almost informed by everything that we just covered. It almost becomes like the writing on the wall. So when we look at what leaders value most, it's not one approach. It's a combination, right? So our research here, you're seeing the top 5, kind of like your tried and true pieces that would be really, I think, effective when you think about how to design your experience of development. But like I said, it's a combination. And the key takeaway for all of us here, there's no single silver bullet here. By this point, the experience really becomes the output, like I said. So you've identified and prioritized the role, the moment, and what the data tells you. Now you design the experience to match that. So very much that same framework I shared earlier, right? You can see under each kind of moment that we talked about earlier today, that there's different sort of approaches you might take, right? Let's go back to that example where somebody has a difficult conversation tomorrow. They have to address poor performance. You're likely not going to have them assigned to some kind of, robust cohort-based program. Let's say that program's 3 months out. That's not going to help them with the just-in-time need that they have. So you want to meet them where they are. Maybe it's a conversation planner that helps them ground and how do I maintain self-esteem while also giving this feedback, right? We think about the personal and practical needs. They're able to do something to practice. Maybe it's a simulation that they get to do on their own where they get immediate feedback, or a micro course that reminds them of some of the ways to really give feedback in the STAR AR format, let's say. That's really where you're meeting them where they are, and that's going to be key. So Here's just an example that ties it all together for one of my clients, Caterpillar. So at CAT, and this was many years ago at this point, they had a focus on frontline leaders. That was kind of their targeted role. They knew that it was a critical role for delivering on their strategy. There also was challenges with engagement at the time that they were seeing in their data. So what they did is they aligned it to key moments, and they used what they had, their sort of like needs analysis, as well as some thought leadership from us, by the way. So different multiple resources of data, like I talked about, to really guide decisions about what that learning journey could look like. And we got pretty particular about it. It was a huge undertaking. There was so much scale that we had to keep in mind, which is definitely a parameter we had to think about, right, to scale it, but also see the kind of results that we wanted to see. So there was a blend approach that we took at the time, and the results speak for themselves. You can see that on the right-hand side. I think ultimately, we saw strong engagement. It scaled beautifully. And what I really love about this story, too, is I think that win really helped set up the COE team for success and some of the other things that they needed to address later down the road. For example, right now we are putting together and delivering successfully a production manager program, again, because that's what the critical audience is today, and that's been going really, really well based off of the feedback that we've seen. And so super proud of what Kat's been able to accomplish, and they absolutely followed through that journey of those 4 areas that we've walked through today. So I always like to bring it back to you, because this is about you today. Based on everything that we've covered, I know it was a lot, pretty quick, right? But hopefully you have a better picture of what feels like your next high payoff move. Hopefully you have a better answer to that question, your own river monster that you know you need to catch. And if you don't have the full answer, that's okay. Your next move is clarity. So again, just to bring back those 4 areas is the thing that you need to do next, walking away from today's webinar, getting clear on your most critical roles. You need to answer that question to begin with. Is it focusing on key moments or grounding decisions in stronger data, perhaps? Rethinking the experience itself as a whole. I want you to write in the chat what's top of mind for you. I'm very curious. And yes, while you add in maybe what your next move is, Kim has highlighted just for everybody. If you have a question, you can feel free to put that in there. We've got 2 Nicoles, one who's thinking about the roles, the other the data component. That's great. Data and roles, I'm hearing a lot. Okay. This gets me excited because this means that you are starting to get closer to understanding what the highest payoff looks like for you. And I know that we have a couple minutes left, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick it over to Hannah to see if there are any questions that I can answer with our couple minutes remaining.
Yeah, so we had a question come in, I believe, regarding the Leader 3 Ready assessment, asking how you were able to measure effectiveness on the job, just given how difficult measurement can be.
Yeah, happy to answer that, Kristen. It's a good question. So what we do is we put together a simulation that helps bring up challenges that really are essentially showing them how they can demonstrate a particular competency. So let's say, for example, that we go back to that example I gave earlier. We know that people need to inspire others and really bring that vision to alive, right? So they would have a vision speech, let's say, within their simulated day, where they'd have to put together, right, based on the context of the fictitious company, and really start to put that vision speech together and actually go ahead and do the vision speech. So how we answer that question is we don't ask them, what would you do? We say, show me. And we have some criteria, right, based on our 50 plus years of research that says for that specific competency, right, inspiring others, what are the key actions, the behaviors that are observable and measurable? There's a team of essentially assessors, trained assessors that rate that, and they come to a consensus, and it's part of this bigger report that they get, that they walk through in a feedback session that helps them think through, okay, I showed it myself as effective, or maybe I could be more consistent when it came to that specific skill area. what could I have done differently, and how does it tie to my actual role and context? So we always have that as part of the puzzle, but what it does is it really isolates outside of their own environment. How well do they effectively demonstrate that skill, and what specifically might they be able to do differently? Because sometimes they're good at one thing, but maybe another aspect of that skill area is a bit weaker. And so we get very drilled down in that, and that's really the beauty, I'd say, of something objective like a simulation assessment. Hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Leah. We may have time for one more if you have a preference.
Yeah, I'm taking a look here. Okay, so there's a question about Caterpillar, how long the journey was. And then there's one about Succession. Okay, so I'll try to do a 2-for-1 punch. For Succession planning, yes, we do have a model for that. You know, when you're thinking about strategic talent reviews and how to think through making decisions, we can absolutely be part of that process. Often what I like to say is we kind of meet you where you are. So what does succession look like? It doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's probably other data sources that you have, but what we bring to the table, of course, is assessment, and also being able to think through, okay, what does this data mean? And what does it inform in terms of development planning and actually accelerating someone? Once we understand the readiness question, right? Ready in 3 years, we don't want to have 3 years pass by and still say ready in 3 years. So a lot of what we help support is thinking through not just who is ready and how ready are they, but also what does it look like to support them after the fact, and think through really the accountability and all those different pieces that really, I think, make something like this sing. So hopefully that answers that question. And I know that we're over time, so I imagine, Hannah and Kim, if there's any specific questions that we weren't able to answer, we can always follow up about that. We have a record of it.
Yes, thank you, Leah, and thank you to everyone who joined today. If, again, as Leah said, if we were not able to get to your question, and there were several, somebody from DDI will follow up with you. If you are planning to attend ATD this weekend, we will also be there, and we would love to talk to you in our booth. Booth 1601, look for us there. Also, our next webinar is on June 10th. You will find the link to that in your resources section, and that is Leadership Development at the Speed of Business. Yes, the slides are available in your resources as well. That will close out. Thank you so much, everyone. And Leah, thank you so much for your time today. Great information. Oh, Valentina's going to be at ATD. We'll see you there, Valentina.
Thanks, everyone.